time. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about goals. My research background is in goals, and so I have that sort of framework in my understanding of children's screen time. I'm going to talk to you real briefly about the ways that I talk to parents about why it might be a good idea to go screen-free or screen-light or somewhere, shoot for the moon and land among the stars, somewhere there. And then I'm going to talk to you really about the crux of how I work with parents by encouraging them to spoil their children, which is a positive goal as opposed to a negative one. Okay? So, like I said, we're going to start by talking about food, and I do promise that I figure we're all hungry, right? So either jelly beans or healthy food, right? I do know what conference we're at, but I think you all know as much, if not more than I do about screen time, so we'll talk a little bit about food first. Like I said previously, clinically, I work with eating disorders in a residential facility in Florida, and we know that in general, dieting is not a helpful way to look at the obesity crisis. And also, I know that eating disorders are something that have a very strong developmental roots and focus, which problematic screen time does as well, right? And I also know that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? This really overused phrase, but because it's really true. If we can get with somebody before they develop some problematic use, it's a lot easier to prevent that problematic use than to try to deal with it after it's already developed. So I'm going to go right into research because I really do like research. So this is from a meta-analysis from the American Psychologist. And the American Psychologist is a really influential journal for psychology with a high impact factor. And this was a meta-analysis called Medicare's Search for an Effective Obesity Treatment. Why diets are not the answer. And you can follow along from the left-hand side, right? These are our studies that were included, the years of follow-up they had. They were all long-term follow-ups. How many people were in the study, what percentage remained there for follow-up. And what they found is that for about 1/3 to 2/3 of the individuals that were included in all these studies is that they were more likely to weigh more than they did at the start of the intervention study for a diet. Okay? So these are our numbers there. This is the percent that regained all of their lost weight or more, somewhere in between 30% and a little bit over 60%. So they also note that those numbers might be somewhat low since the study showed bias. They weren't attempting to show that diets work. They were intervention studies to show that diets work. And so they might show a little bit. I'm sure that there's space right there by the camera. All right. And so they were attempting to show that diets worked, and they didn't. They also discussed that for those people who did lose the weight and keep it off, the small percentage of people, there wasn't an associated health benefit for losing that weight necessarily. So that's great, right? Because it is going to be lunchtime soon, and now we can all eat with abandon, and you don't have to worry too much about dieting. So what do we tell people to do in terms of food if dieting doesn't work? Or if the most common outcome of dieting is diet, and when I'm talking about dieting, I'm talking about external calorie restriction, right? If that doesn't work, and the most likely outcome is that somebody will weigh the same, if not more, following a diet. So I'm going to talk to you about a study that looked at health habits. It looked at health habits in 11,000 people, and it was a 15-year longitudinal study. And it adjusted for all the things you wanted to, right? Like age, sex, race, marital status. It looked at 4 health habits. So this is what you're going to do at lunch. You're going to drink in moderation. I don't know. I don't know if they're providing us alcohol, but if they did, we would drink in moderation, which for women was defined as less than 1 drink per day. For men, 2. We're not going to smoke. The health habit for exercise was defined as exercising 12 times per month. So a little bit less than 50% of the days in a month. And eating fruits and vegetables, specifically 5 servings of fruits and vegetables every day. So they looked at these health habits and the impact over the 15-year study on the participants' relative risk of death. And this is what they found. And if this looks familiar, Dr. Sandra Ahmad is a neuroscientist who wrote a book about the neuroscience of why dieting doesn't work, and also gave a TED Talks about it, and she talks about this research study in that. So these are the obese individuals. Those almost 12,000 people were stratified by their BMI. So they had obese individuals in the study, and our blue line is they had no health habits, following all the way down to 4 health habits. So you can see that even for obese individuals, the addition of just 1 health habit almost drops their mortality risk by half, right? These are the overweight individuals, much lower relative risk of death, but adding about 2 health habits drops their relative risk of death by about half as well. These are normal weight individuals who are doing well overall to begin with. When they add some healthy habits beyond that first one, which seems to be an anomalous finding, their relative risk of death goes down as well. But what's most important about this is that little blue line that I've drawn there. And so if we look at people who only have 4 health habits, they're doing all those things that they're supposed to do, the factor that no longer matters is weight, right, in terms of their relative risk of death. It really doesn't seem to matter anymore what their weight is, in this particular study anyways. So I want to draw a parallel here with screen time. In terms of dieting is a negative goal, right? Don't do something. Screen time for parents is a negative goal too. Don't do this with your kids. Don't do too much of this with your kids. Can there be a positive goal that we can give to parents that might be a little bit more palatable, easier to take, it's a little bit less direct? And so this is a research study that looked at families in which a child was overweight and at least one of the parents was overweight as well. And it randomly assigned them to 2 groups. So it was an experimental study. And the 2 groups were, one where they told the parents to incorporate more fruits and vegetables into their family's diet, trying to get to that 5 marker, right? Which is actually a pretty high marker. The other group, they told the families, you need to cut out the high-fat, the high-sugar foods in your family's diet. Well, when you follow up, which group do you think lost more weight? The fruits and vegetables people, because otherwise why would I include it? It wouldn't make my point very good, right? Okay. So the fruits and vegetables people lost more weight, but they also cut out high-fat, high-sugar foods. They had significantly lower weight. They had also cut out the high-fat, high-sugar foods at the 1-year follow-up compared to their pre-test diets. But they did it without being told to, right? They did it very naturally by having a constitutive goal, one in which the means and the ends can't be separated. I want to be a healthier person, so I'm going to eat more fruits and vegetables. Versus this is an instrumental goal. I don't really care how I get there, but I want to weigh less by June. And I want my kid to weigh less by June too, right? So the means and the ends can be separated in an instrumental goal, and they're much harder to stay on track with an instrumental goal than it is a constitutive goal. All right, so I think this is really a standard case of negative goals failing, and positive goals being a little bit easier to follow. I think that in general, not at this conference, thank goodness, but outside of this conference, there is the belief that screen time rules are really designed to induce guilt. They're not helpful. They're not worth following. It takes a tremendous amount of energy as a parent that is just simply not worth it, right? So how many of you are familiar with Scary Mommy? Yeah, so Scary Mommy is a media news company designed to inform, entertain, and sway the opinions of parents. Scary Mommy has about just under 4 million followers on Facebook. So they have a lot of traction. They have a lot of eyes that they're grabbing. In contrast, the American Academy of Pediatrics, which might have some better parenting advice, has about 150,000 followers on Facebook, okay? So they're very big. They did not disappoint, because on the day that I was making this PowerPoint, I said, let me just pop over there and see what they're talking about. Because they are always talking about screen time, and they have a really clear message about screen time. So, hopefully you're okay with cursing. The article was 8 things I don't give a shit about as a parent. And the one that they chose to highlight was, I don't give a shit about micromanaging screen time. And I include this other article here because they have those articles that are designed to kind of entertain, and they're funny, and they curse, and they're cool, right next to articles that have a little bit more of an academic tone, right? This one about a research study of the potential benefits of redshirting or delaying kindergarten for children. And quotes from this article, there's one quote that said, you know, the kind of things that make you read and cringe. One quote that said, there's something to be said about throwing a kid an iPad after a long day of work. And there is a silence in my house that is flat out glorious when all 3 of my children have their own tablet, right? So they're very, very clear. And if you Google screen time Scary Mommy, these are the articles that come up. They're very, very consistent on screen time, that it's not worth doing, it's designed to induce guilt, the limits don't matter, limited screen time is a better idea, letting kids self-regulate, people who have no prefrontal cortex, let's let them self-regulate, right? So they're very, very clear on this. There's a rebellion against screen time limits, I think. There's a thought that the screen time limits really are designed to induce guilt, that they're not even feasible, they're not possible, which is a lot about, similar to the way some people feel about dieting, right? It's not possible, it's not feasible, it's designed to induce guilt. It's a negative goal. So what I want to talk a little bit about is displacement, which is the idea that, and Doug talked about this morning, right? The more time that children spend with digital media like TV, phones, and computers, the less time that they have for these developmentally appropriate activities, right? And so I wonder from a goal standpoint, this gives us he showed the research, right? So displacement explains some of the negative effects of screens. Some of it might be content, but some of it might just be time that is being taken away from the things that we've known for years and years and years are positively associated with good child development, right? And so, more importantly than that, it gives us a place to intervene. It gives us a positive goal, right? These are our fruits and vegetables of screen time, those activities that are more developmentally appropriate. So you have heard of the big rocks analogy, right? Raise your hand if you've heard of the big. I'm very used to teaching 18-year-olds, so raise your hand if you've heard of something. It's like my go-to. How many people are awake? Raise your hand if you're awake, right? Okay. So the big rocks analogy is we tell parents your child's day is a jar, right? And the big rocks are the things that you really value as a family, that are really important to you, the things that you enjoy doing with your kids. And then you have the medium-sized rocks and the small rocks, and then you have sand, right? And sand at its best, the screen time at its best, is sand. If the content is pro-social, if it's educational, if it's slow action, live action if possible, if all the big rocks are in there first and you pour the sand in, there's going to be some space and it's probably not going to have too much of an effect on the big rocks. At its worst, right, screen time is like acid, right? And it will deteriorate the rocks if the content is not appropriately chosen, if there's too much of it, if it's violent. And so that's what I want to talk about, these big rocks. What are these big rocks? What do we know from child development are those things that have the biggest impact on positive child development? And can we tell parents to put those things in first? Because right now, the sand is going in first, right? So you read the research studies, and for children, I'm really focused on younger children, so somewhere in between 18 months or 2 years and 10 years old, they have somewhere in between 2 and 10 hours of screen time in a day, right? More than any other single discretionary activity. And if they put that in first, there is absolutely no time for the big rocks in the jar, right? The jar is completely filled up with that sand. So, but before I get into that, I remember I told you that I was going to do this, so I warned you and you stayed put. So, but before I get into that, I'm going to talk about when I get to work with families and I get to talk to families, the 5 reasons that I suggest it might be a good idea to go screen light or to go screen free. Has anybody heard of screen free parenting? A few of you. Good. Okay, well that's us. That's our site. We don't have 3.7 million followers like Scary Mommy, but maybe one day. So when I talk to parents, I like to go over the 5 reasons. For really young kids, why it might be a good idea to limit screens. To provide some psychoeducation, to maybe address some of those myths about screen time that Dr. Freed does a really good job of talking about, right? And I really like acronyms because then I don't forget what I'm going to say. And then maybe parents don't forget what I said either. So I talk to them about why they might want to swap the screen time, and those reasons are sleep, weight, attention, aggression, and talking or language acquisition. Because swallow the screen time for language acquisition didn't sound as good, right? Right. So the first reason is sleep. Kids who watch screens sleep less. A meta-analysis that included 67 studies showed that screen time was associated with going to bed later and less total sleep time. We already know this, right? But for some parents, screens seem like a really good way to get that kid to calm down before bedtime, right? But the research doesn't support that it's not going to help them calm down, and it's not going to help them fall asleep quickly, and it's not going to help them sleep well. Second reason is weight. Screen time displaces activity. That's what I'm talking about, displacement. The relationship in between screen time and weight has at least 4 pathways, right? So kids who are watching screens or playing with screens are sedentary, they're not active. They are watching advertisements for non-nutritious foods or experiencing product placement for non-nutritious foods, right? That they later ask for, they engage in mindless eating. And like I just told you, are sleeping less, and there's a relationship in between sleep and weight, right? I like, in talking to parents, when researchers come up with those really nice little formulas that you can give them, because they make a lot of sense, right? Like, one study of 89 children in Scotland in between ages 2 and 6 that found that for each additional hour of television viewing, there was a 2.2 pound increase in the child's overall body weight, right? So that is a formula. It makes a lot of sense. It's easy to transmit that information. The third reason that I talk to parents about is attention. Screens are fast and life is slow. That's the overstimulation hypothesis. I do premise this is the last piece of clothing that I'm going to take off. Even if I get cut, I will keep the rest of it on. So that's the overstimulation hypothesis, which Dr. Christakis talks about, right? That rapid exposure to rapid image change during critical periods of brain development may result in children expecting that rapid image change or stimulation. But then they sit in a classroom like this with me, and as much clothing as I take off, I'm still not as interesting, right, as the screen. And so they display behaviors that kind of look like inattention, right? Christakis also has another one of those little formulas that for each hour of television viewing prior to age 3, there was a 10% increase in attention problems at age 7. So what do parents say? Yeah, but that's just correlational research, right? So it doesn't matter, because correlational research does not matter. The kids, they're probably doing all sorts of other things in the family. And there's some truth to that. It's good that parents are critical. There's also experimental research on attention too, right? Where children are randomly assigned to different types of programming, either fast-paced or slow-paced, entertainment or educational, or coloring, right? Colors. What is coloring? And then given a task that requires executive functioning, right? Things like impulse control and planning and sustained attention. And the children who watch either the entertainment-based program or the Spliced Together Quickly program have significantly worse performance than children who got to do those boring things like coloring. So I think that's a really good reason to encourage parents to maybe turn it off before school, right? Because that's when you're going to ship them off to somewhere where they're required to do a whole lot of executive functioning. But school might put it in front of them anyways. That's a whole other talk, right? Okay, the fourth reason is aggression. Dog trap. You really summarized everything very well this morning, so I just skipped through all of these slides. Right? Yeah. And this is, right, so aggression, over 50 years of research, including over 300 studies, shows that watching violence on TV results in children having more aggressive thoughts, having higher arousal levels, having less pro-social behavior. And he went over that really well this morning, such that the American Academy of Pediatrics says in the most recent statement on media and violence that there's a proven scientific connection in between virtual violence and real-world aggression. Talking or language acquisition, right? Kids who watch screens may talk later in life. I work a lot with families that are very young, and it may seem like it should be easier, right? Because they don't have, they're waiting until 8th and all those other good movements that we have, and so they don't have their own devices. But families of really young children are really struggling with this issue as well. Because it kind of seeps in and it gets out of control before they realize it and they know what to do with themselves. And also, young children are really annoying. No, they're actually really great, but they require a lot of attention, right? They require a lot of one-on-one, and so those are the parents that use it for something in the beginning and then it becomes something that they have a little bit more trouble controlling later on. And so those parents really care about language acquisition. And Josh talked this morning about some of the research that was used in some of the campaigns against maybe Einstein and other video companies that were really selling to parents that videos are how your kid's going to talk, right? And the research on that is really good. Like even one study that showed they randomly assigned the parents, it's experimental, right, to watching the same baby video for 5 hours a week for 4 weeks, right? So they watched this thing for 20 hours. And they watched it either without their parents present. Oh, well, that must be the problem, right? So then some of them watched it with the parents present. And then this third group of parents, they were just given a list of target words, right? And they were told, incorporate these in your day any way that you feel comfortable. Well, the babies that were in, the parents who just incorporated them in any way they felt comfortable, they were the only toddlers who knew the words any better than chance in those 3 conditions. So it really doesn't work. And then we have really new research that shows for each 30-minute increase in time spent with a handheld device, there's a 49% increase in the likelihood of an expressive language delay. Okay? So really, really huge.
Can you repeat that again?
Yeah. And that's this citation, and I have them all at the end for you too. That's a presentation. But so for each 30-minute increase in a toddler's time spent with a handheld device, there was a 49% increase in the likelihood of that toddler having an expressive language delay.
Did you say you're going to give us all these?
Yeah, they're all the references are on the slides too. Yeah, so you can come back to them. And most parents really want their kids to talk, right? And sometimes that's why they use the screen. Just like sleep, they want their kid to calm down and go to bed, or they want them to talk, and so maybe the screen will help with that. Yesterday, my son, who eats an inordinate amount of food, more than my husband and I put together, and he's 3, and he has a little bit of a meat problem, like he wants to eat meat all the time. He was having a little meltdown when we first got to Boston. We were trying to figure out where to go, and he said, "Is there no meat in Boston?" Right? Okay? You don't want to wait any longer to hear that. You want them to talk as soon as they can, because they say really great things like, "Is there no meat in Boston?" He doesn't know, he's never been here. He doesn't know what kind of place this is. Right? Might be very liberal, it is. I don't know. Okay? So I think the SWOT gives, at least for our parents with young children, some reason, some incentive or motivation, something that they care about, that might provide some incentive to help them cut down on screen time. But like I said, I'm going to spend less time on that. And Doug, this is a very embarrassing moment for me because I'm going to talk about your research in front of you. So just he will interrupt me if I get any of it wrong, right?
If you like.
Yes, you can. And he already talked about this morning, so you already heard it. But the question that we have to ask, right? So we started talking about dieting, and we're looking at does dieting work? The answer is no, it doesn't work. We're all going to eat whatever we want at lunch. But we're going to try to eat a lot of fruits and vegetables, right? We're going to try to be active later, and we're not going to smoke. That's what we learned. That's the quick overview. So then we have to ask the question about screen time too. Does it actually work? Is it actually effective? And Doug's provided great research to show that it does, right? Parental monitoring, so limiting content and limiting time. And a study of 1,321, maybe?
About right.
About right, okay. He's giving me a little leeway.
You're off maybe by 20, so
Okay.
I think that's within the margin.
Okay, that's within the margin of error. So looking at that study, finding really far-reaching consequences for parents who are doing this parental monitoring thing, right? So associated in a prospective study with positive children's sleep, their academic performance, really importantly because it wasn't just the parents saying that they were doing well, but rather the teachers, right? Who didn't know, their total screen time and prosocial and aggressive behavior. So it does work, right? Contrary to what Scary Mommy is telling everybody, it does work. It's not a waste of time. It's not designed to induce guilt. So then the next question is, great, all right, so let's tell parents that they need to do this, and let's see how that works. This is a meta-analysis looking at different intervention studies that are focused on one of, if not both, outcomes, right? Child's overall weight and screen time. And these downward arrows mean that the intervention study had a positive effect, right? The screen time went down. And then as they didn't measure it, no effect, upward arrow, the screen time went up despite the intervention. Some of them seem to work, some of them don't seem to work. Overall, the meta-analysis didn't find a significant effect on screen time for the intervention studies until it was broken out by age group, and then they did find a significant effect for the youngest cohort, so the under 6-year-old, which is where I tend to focus. So I was like, great, that's good news, okay? So there might be some hope for our youngest kids and the parents who are struggling with it. So I told you that this is what I was going to talk about today, more or less. How to spoil your kids, so how to develop a positive goal. Something that might naturally edge out screen time the way the fruits and vegetables in our dieting studies naturally edges out the high-fat, high-sugar foods, right? This is my husband, my dog, and that is the person who has a meat problem working on. He eats 4 eggs for breakfast. Literally, it's not like a Rocky movie, like literally eats 4 eggs for breakfast. And then sometimes cries and says, why isn't there more on my plate? Like, we have had him medically checked. I promise, I'm sure that's going to be like the first question. He's been tested for celiac disease and a million other things, but he seems fine, it's just, he eats a lot of meat. And so that's us walking in the woods. And I think my daughter was probably the one who took the picture, she's 6. So that's what I want to focus on. Do we have a positive goal that can edge out the screen time? And do we have a goal that's not instrumental, right? So So remember, dieting is an instrumental goal. I don't care what I do as long as I weigh less. And for some parents, although we wouldn't couch it that way, less screen time is an instrumental goal too. It doesn't matter if I use a pepper shaker, or if I have an app that does it, or if I hide stuff, or if I scream at them, or what I do, as long as I get to less screen time. I can take any method. A constitutive goal is one in which we can't separate the means from the ends. So let's give them a constitutive positive goal. And I suggest that we spend about 2 times as much time talking to parents about what they can do instead of screen time, as opposed to all the negative effects of screen time. And I know we don't spend that much time talking to them about the negative effects of screen time to begin with, but let's spend 2 times as much time. Sorry, I'm consistently standing in front of this. All right, so I'm going to go over each of the categories in the S.P.O.I.L system. Before I do that, I'll tell you what they are. You know them. There's nothing new. It's not fantastic science. It's just put in a way that is hopefully a little bit more memorable and easy to take for parents, right? So social activities, play, really emphasizing free play, imaginative play, sociodramatic play, whatever you want to call it. Outdoor activities, independent work, which is one of my favorite, because my house can be clean, stuff can be picked up, and L, literacy-based activities. So again, things that you all already know and talk to parents about, but just couched in a way that makes it a little bit easier for parents to remember and understand. I came up with it after teaching infant child development for somewhere between 5, 7, 8 years, and reading the research, and I found that consistently there were these areas that were really associated with positive child development outcomes. But I didn't think that we had an easy way to transmit that information to parents. And so coming up with the categories was really easy. Coming up with a way to tell parents to do it on a daily basis that wasn't child abuse was a little bit harder. So my original version was that they should broil their children. And I didn't think that would catch on very well, or that would be taken very well by parents. So I'm really proud of the fact that we were able to make it a little bit more catchy than that. And it sounds really good, at least in spoiling daily. All right, so our first category is social, probably the most important category, right? And we saw from the earlier presentation how little time children are spending with their parents on a weekly basis. But having a strong attachment with a parent is related to virtually every outcome we want in our children, right? They listen a little bit better, they do better in school, they tend to be a little bit happier, calmer. And having a good relationship with peers, or siblings, or cousins, people their own age who aren't telling them what to do is really important too, right? Because that's where they learn things like cooperation and competition. That's where they learn perspective take, empathy, theory of mind. Somebody else has a different opinion than me, and maybe I want to persuade them to have my own opinion. My kids have gotten really good at that, right? My daughter told me last night they're sleeping in the same hotel room, so nobody slept within a radius of that hotel room up below next to us. What did she want? If you read one more book, then we won't keep calling you in, right? I know what you want, here's what I want, let's come to an agreement, right? Okay, so they learn that through social relationships, through face-to-face social relationships. And we suggest some ideas for parents: read together, play board games together, go for a walk, but certainly anything that the parents enjoy doing with their children. They should just be supported in the fact that there's real good stuff that comes from just spending time with your kid from developmental outcome. All right, this is a study by Vanwater et al. That's published in Pediatrics, and it looked at, I'm going to reach over your head, I'm sorry, so that I get the sample size right. How many kids were in this? I don't know. Maybe I don't have it. Yeah, I do. Yeah, 1,700 kids, over 1,700 kids. Controlled for all the things you want, like neighborhood, mom's work hours, income level, and it looked at the displacement effect, so the number of hours spent watching television and its relationship to all those other activities. And so these are percent decreases because the effect sizes are really quite large for social activities. They used a daily diary sampling method, which is definitely a challenging method to use as a researcher, but gives you really great information, right? So they looked at what the kids were doing in a 24-hour period on a weekday and on a weekend. The white bars are on the weekday, the black bars are on the weekend. The top graph is for each hour of television viewed, the percent decreases in time spent with their parent and other activities. The bottom graph is for siblings. So for each hour of television viewed, the percent decreases in time spent with their siblings in the home. So you can see for the top graph, if we're looking at weekdays, somewhere in between 15 and 20% on average, less time with a parent for each hour spent viewing television. So really strong evidence that time spent with television specifically as a form of a screen is displacing social activity. It is threatening one of these developmental heavy hitters. Down below, the effects for siblings time together is even bigger, right? So somewhere in between 30 and 40% on a weekday, less time with their siblings if they were watching TV without their sibling present. Well, that's all right, because my kids watch TV together. Well, the research interestingly found that even when the siblings were watching TV together, there was still a percent decrease in the time those siblings spent together on other activities. There's only so many hours in a day, so that kind of makes sense, right? Those are the percent decreases, which are really great because it allows you to compare across groups. The actual numbers are interesting too. So these are the actual numbers for parents for each hour spent watching television, a decrease in the number of minutes in time spent with their parents. So for 0 to 5, it's almost 1 to 1, 49, 45 minutes. For the older kids, it's a little bit less, 15, 23 minutes. That's why the percent decreases are important, right? Because the percent decreases show that it's still significant because those kids are spending less time with their parents to begin with. So it's still having a really large effect on how much time they spend with their parents. The authors of the study note that their research really provides evidence for the American Academy of Pediatrics recommendations of no screen time until 2, now it's no screen time until 18 months, and then, maybe about high quality and width and blah, 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 right? That it really is, the screen time is replacing that face-to-face interaction that they think is so important for brain development. But they also note that it might be equally consequential for older children. While they aren't having as much rapid brain growth during that time, it is having a big impact on their time spent. The number of minutes for the siblings were really great too, and sometimes greater than a 1-to-1 relationship. So television viewing was really resulting in a lot less time with the siblings interacting. And that's it. All right, my next category, the P, is free play, and I'm really emphasizing imaginative play, socio-dramatic play, fantastical pretend play, whatever you want to call it, which seems to be two sides of the same coin with rough and tumble play, too, right? The research on imaginative play is great. I mean, we have intervention studies where children are encouraged in fantastical pretend play, and we see an increase in their executive functioning afterwards. The message to parents, if their child is under 6, is that there's no academic activity that could have as much of an impact as allowing your child to engage in some real free play. It builds all those great things we want them to do, like sustained attention, inhibiting impulses, planning ahead, right? They have to think about their role, they have to think about what the rules are, what other people's roles are in the game, and map it all out. And that's what we want them to be learning. There's also research to show that it's effective, right? The soldier study, when they ask 4-year-olds to stand still, and how long does this 4-year-old stand still? Like, not at all, right? But when they ask the 4-year-old to stand still, like they're guarding a castle and it's a really important job, and the 4-year-old stands still 4 times as long. They're building that executive functioning through the pretend play. This is a great one for parents because for most parents, they really don't have to do anything. They kind of just have to get out of the way. Some parents are good at pretend play, and if they're good at pretend play, then that's great. Encourage them to do that. A lot of parents struggle with wanting to impart lessons during pretend play, with wanting to control pretend play, with not being okay with being controlled. Like, no, I don't want to do that, right? Do that a little bit. My character wouldn't do that, right? But parents can rearrange furniture and build a fort. This is an area that I think really gets hijacked. I work a lot with Janet Lansbury, who talks about young children's capacity for self-directed play. And it gets hijacked because when parents need to do something with young children, the most common things that they need to do are to check out, or to take a shower, or to make dinner, right? Especially for parents that are staying home with their kids. They hand them a screen because they say, I cannot pay attention to you right now, so this is going to pay attention to you. And so in all those little instances, the kid's capacity for self-directed play is hijacked. And then later on, they seem to not be able to entertain themselves, right? And those are the parents that say, I don't know how you get anything done if you're screen light or if you're screen free, because I have to use a screen to get something done. Well, yeah, because the screen created a problem that only the screen can solve, right? I mean, sure that it would continue to exist in a child's life. This is our, oh, I knew something would come up when I used it on there. They're in between 8 and 11% decreases, which you can see on the far side. I knew when I transitioned all my graphics over to that computer that something would not follow. But this is also from the Vandewater study, and it's the percent decreases in the number of minutes spent in play for each hour of television viewing. It was the next strongest compared to the social category. So the kids on a weekday in between 0 and 12 had somewhere in between an 8 and 11% decrease in play for each hour of screen time. So it really is being displaced by screen time. They defined it a little bit differently than I do, so they include things like board games, coloring, which I will put elsewhere, and I'll talk about that later, but also imaginative play. They suggest that maybe this is happening because TV and pretend play are both indoor activities. That probably depends where you live, right? But if they're both indoor activities, one is really easy and requires no cleanup and setup, right? And the other one requires a little bit more cleanup or setup, or you just leave it a mess. You say, I'm building cognitive functioning. Right? That is why my house looks like this. I'm building cognitive functioning when I dump the laundry basket and everyone just picks as they need it.
Is that true?
I think so. Planning, they have to search. It's kind of like a scavenger hunt.
I agree.
You don't know what you're going to find. I have a reason for everything. That's what our parents lead us to believe. There's a reason for all the things. And if there isn't, I'll make one up. Okay, so our third category is getting kids outside. Getting outside is good, not just for kids, but for all of us, right? So associated with increase in serotonin production, our own natural antidepressant, associated with vitamin D production. Some research suggests that it improves or restores attention reservoirs, that it improves creative problem solving. If you're listening, it's virtually all those problems that we talk about with excessive screen time. It's kind of the antidote. I think that is a session that was running concurrently at this time. I don't know how you picked this, because I don't know what I would have picked if I wasn't talking. Not me, but maybe that's because I know what I was going to say. But yeah, it really is the antidote to screen time. And it's really easy for parents, perhaps creating a place in their backyard that is safe for the children to play, removing hazards where they can play freely, or going to the park, or going for a walk, or watching birds. Just get outside and you will find that especially young children really know what to do when they're outside, and they don't really need a lot of direction from you. And they tend to be a little bit calmer, a little bit easier to work with. The Vandewater study did not find a relationship in between active outdoor play and television viewing, so I made a chart instead. Right? Is it as good as hers? Maybe not. This is from another study. This was about, sorry, I'm going to go over your head again. It was 64,000 kids from the National Survey of Children's Health in 2006. And what they did was they looked at broke the children into categories based on how many days per week they had 20 minutes of active outdoor time. And comparing the children who had active outdoor time every day on that scale compared to the children who didn't have active time every day, these children had 2 times the likelihood of having screen time over 2 hours. Right? So some evidence to suggest that if we encourage parents to get their kids outside and tell them about the things that this is positively associated with, it might tip the teeter-totter and they'll have less time spent on screens. This is my favorite category, but probably one that requires a little bit more explanation. So independent work. Virtually every theory of child development says that it's really important for children to feel a sense of industry and accomplishment. Right? And that we should give them opportunities to complete independent work. I have things like child-sized chores there, and I'll talk about the research on child-sized chores in a minute. I also include things like coloring, because I was a goal researcher first, and so if the child is engaged in an activity that has a specified outcome, like I'm going to complete this worksheet, to me that's qualitatively different than pretend play, which doesn't have a specified outcome. It's play for play's sake, right? Same thing with Legos. Certainly Legos, if the child is using them constructively to build whatever they want, that would be defined as play for me. For me, if they're using the Legos to follow this really complicated booklet on how they're going to build an RV out of Legos, there's a specified outcome. They're sustaining their attention They are inhibiting their impulses to get up and run away. I'm not saying that one is better than the other, but I'm just saying that they're different. And to me, things like homework and following a task to completion like that are independent work. Research on child-sized chores suggests that when children, a 25-year study, when children started them at age 3 to 4, it was positively associated with academic success, career success, self-control, and self-sufficiency. And that makes a lot of sense, right? When we ask our children to do chores, we're asking them to inhibit their impulse to go and do something else, and instead do this task first. It is building self-control, which some research suggests might be more important than things like IQ, right? And it's actually easier to build than IQ. It's something that we can work on with kids. This is another place where my numbers didn't fall through. This is also from the Vandewater study. They looked at homework. So the decreases in time spent in homework on weekday nights for each hour of television viewing. For the 6 to 8-year-olds, there was a 14% decrease. For the older kids, there was an 18% decrease. They say based on those numbers that parents would do well to ban or severely limit screen time on weeknight. Probably depends if you think that homework is a developmental heavy hitter. I don't think for our youngest kid that research suggests it is. But maybe chores might be, right? Or other independent work that they could be spending their time doing more focused on homework. The last category is literacy. Research is really, there are amazing benefits for reading to or having your child read, right? For all ages. If you're interested in academic achievement, having 500 children's books in the home is related to 3.2 years additional in how far the kid goes in school, right? Those same researchers did that study cross-culturally in 42 studies and in 42 countries and found that for each additional book in the home, it was related to for a incremental increase in the standardized test scores. And there was no ceiling, so usually you see, like, at some point you get to the point where there's just too many books in the home and there's no place to sleep or eat, right? Effects drop off, but they didn't find that. They didn't find a ceiling effect. If you say, if one more person talks to me about standardized tests, I'm going to rip my hair out. I get you, I'm with you, and I feel the same way. But research also shows that literacy is really important for social skills, too. So a study of preschoolers that found the more time they were read to, the better their theory of mind was, the better if they had higher empathy, and were better able to perspective take with other children. That research also compared it to television viewing and didn't find the same effect for television viewing. So, and though it compared it to movies, and did find that movies had a positive effect on children's perspective taking. Perhaps because the character follows through in a more reliable plot and things that maybe a TV show does. But your 5 and 6-year-olds really should be watching feature-length films anyways, so we don't need to tell them about that part. But I told you. So anything that gets children reading, like visiting the library, reading to them, having them do some pre-literacy work, like pretending to be the doctor and write the doctor's notes, all that pre-literacy stuff is really fun too. My daughter, when she was 3, loved to pretend to read to us like the librarian, because the librarian was like the superhero, so she would do the whole. And she did it once with Goodnight Moon, and I have it on video, and I'm so happy, because she opened up Goodnight Moon, and she did the very professional way, and then showed everybody the picture, and then said, "This is a story about farting in the living room." I know, that was a good one, right? But she knows that even before they can read, they can understand plot, they can understand hooking you in the beginning. This is a story about farting in the living room. I'm showing you a different study than the Vandewater one. This study looked at a nationally representative sample of 8,900 4-year-olds. That's your dark bar here, that national representative sample. And then a rural sample of low-income children. There are 400 in that sample, and that's your light gray bar. And they looked at the frequency with which the parents read to their children, and then the screen time, the television time that those children had. On average, the 4-year-olds had about 2.5 hours of television time in this study, but there was a significant difference in between parents who said that they read to their children daily and parents who said that they read to their children not at all. right? So some evidence to suggest that if we promote literacy, screen time might naturally get edged out. Just like if we promote fruits and vegetables, the high-fat, high-sugar foods get edged out. Vandewater didn't find an effect in the daily diary study, and here's her numbers. Here's the numbers from the Vandewater study for how much time children spent being read to or reading themselves. And you can see it's in between 11 and 16 minutes. And so they know for them to find the time trade-off, there actually has to be time spent. And these are just average numbers. And there's such little time being spent reading that they didn't find an effect. And I wanted to tell you that about, this is something I do in class too that my students hate. They're like, I thought we were done with that. Let's go backward, we're supposed to go forward. I wanted to tell you for chores too, I don't have any research to suggest, we talked about homework, but I don't have any research to suggest that there's a time trade-off with chores, and that's because children are not spending very much time, if any time at all, doing chores, right? So there was a survey study where parents of the current generation said that about 82% of them said, we had to do chores when we were growing up. And the same sample of parents, 28% of them said, I required my children to do chores. So a very small percentage of children are doing chores and spending a very small amount of time if they are doing them. So very difficult to find a time trade-off there. All right, where was I? We're not reading the kids enough, that's where I was. Okay, so I think that the S.P.O.I.L system gives parents, sometimes when I work with parents of young children that are talking about, well, if we decrease the screen time or if we go a little bit screen light, like, what do we do all day? Because normally this provides really good benchmarks for us, right? Like we do it for an hour or two in the morning while I clean up, and then it's an hour at rest time while I get some work done, and then pre-dinner there's an hour there, and I don't know what is going to fill all that time. And so these are the things that are going to fill all that time. And hopefully, maybe like the fruits and vegetables, if we have a positive goal, it edges out the screen time naturally. It also gives parents something that they feel good about. The S.P.O.I.L activities are being a good parent, right? It's not just looking for an outcome. It's being a good parent. It's a part of that goal. And if it doesn't edge out screen time, there's going to be no negative effects, right? By them spending more time in these categories for your kids. So this is how we're doing it, and I don't mean my really loud children in the hotel room, because they do it naturally. Because if you don't hijack it with screens in the beginning, they develop that capacity for self-directed play. But we have a simple website, Screen-Free Parenting, where we produce one article bi-weekly that we call TechWise. This is an example. Screens takes hold in children's creativity decline, where we talk about the creativity crisis. So one article bi-weekly where we focus on some research about screen time or some research about other interesting child developmental stuff, sometimes the S.P.O.I.L categories. And then one article bi-weekly where we promote 5 activities that our kids did in the last week, S.P.O.I.L-based activities. There's not a whole lot of thought that goes into that, I'll tell you right now. It's 5 pictures of things that they did in the last week. It's not designed to be Pinterest-worthy stuff. It's designed to be inspiration, jumping off point for parents to also share 5 things that their kids did in the last week, that sort of thing, to build a community around the idea that there's 1 million, and that's what we call that series, 1 million screen-free activities that kids can engage in instead of screen. So that's McKenna. She's walking on a slack line. That's on our side yard. It's neon yellow and neon orange, so the neighbors really love us because it looks like we're doing construction. We're not. We're just trying to not spend so much time on the TV. And then this is my son. I thought we were playing cars, but then I went to go get something to eat, and he dumped the cars out and put the bucket on his head and found a plate and pretended like he was in the car. Okay, and he was driving the race car. So again, just a way to try to create a community around parenting screen-free, or screen-light. The majority of the people that we work with aren't screen-free. That's kind of like the moon with young kids. I think it's easier with young kids. But if they're limiting, if they're somewhere under 2 hours, then that's great, right? And they're far below average. The irony, we really do get the irony of promoting screen-free parenting via screens. It's not lost on us. You don't need to point it out. It has been pointed out to us several times. We're aware of it. But we're really attempting to take the idea of being screen-light to the marketplace, to the internet, to where the parents are and the battle's really being lost. ideally, our end goal would be to make it something that's hip and cool and counterculture, and that people are really sick of the screens being talked at their kids, and now this is a cool thing to be. Initially, parents talked about that if they limited their screens, they felt really isolated, and they felt like their willpower was slowly eroding because nobody else around them was. And so that is sort of our goal here, is that we give them a space where everybody else is, and they're really supportive of one another. I think that's all I was going to say there. So we have about 20,000 followers on the website. We started about 1.5 years ago, and that's continued to grow. So we also have a Facebook page, and that has about 15,000 members. And then we just kind of do what the parents tell us to do in general. We're not that creative or smart on our own. And so the parents said, hey, can we have a community? Because we want to be able to talk to one another about being screen-free. So we started a closed community for parents. That is growing exponentially in a way that's challenging to keep contained. So we might start building duplicate communities so that the groups can stay around 5,000 members, because that seems to be like a secret number. You know how there's like a secret time you put your kids to bed, where like if they go too early, then they're just going to mess around all night, but if you go too late, then they're going to mess all around all night. That's that sweet spot. I think 5,000 is the sweet spot for the community, where it's really supportive. It's enough that they get a lot of feedback from each other, but it's not too much that there's the internet takes hold, and all the rest of the internet. So that's at about 7,000 members now, with like 300 to 400 members asking to join every week. In my totally unscientific content analysis of what happens on there, it is around 3 themes. Parents share screen-free successes. Think like transoceanic flight for 12 hours with a 2-year-old, that they did screen-free. And then the other parents provide a lot of congratulations and support for that, and also like, cool, I got one coming up, what did you do? Can you tell me what you have? Parents share challenges. Most common challenges seem to be grandparents. Is one of the most common challenges, that parents say, like, I'm really trying to limit this, but my parents or my partner's parents are not supportive of it, and all they want to do with them is watch videos or TV, and they don't really respect the boundaries. Or schools, a lot of times now, that parents are screen light, and then they go to school and they feel like they just have no control anymore. And then the third thing is questions. Get a lot of people that say, okay, I'm in this community, I'm totally not screen-free, please don't kick me out, but I've noticed that my 2.5-year-old is having a lot of problems, and having a lot of meltdowns, and they're really inattentive, and I'm relating it to when they're on screens in the morning. And so can you, hive mind, tell me how I'm supposed to talk to them about the fact that I want to change this? In general, the community seems to create somewhere in between 2 and 7 posts per day. Each post gets somewhere in between 10 and 50 responses. So a lot of conversation is going back and forth and trying to support and help one another. We've talked with some people who want local communities too, so we've started to develop those, where parents, that one is from Rochester with just under 50 members, Rochester, New York, where they want, like, again, I feel really isolated in this. Can I get a group of people around me that are going to be okay with the idea that I don't want my 3-year-old to go to a birthday party where they're going to the movie theater or something like that, right? And I get some support for what I'm doing. We just started this. This is a forum on our website. Far less technologically designed to reel and keep the people in. And so for some parents that find it hard to regulate their own use, this is a little bit easier way to pose a question and get in and out. So we just started that. We'll see if that takes off. I would think that it won't quite to the degree that Facebook does. But for people who hate Facebook, like me, you could go there. We're not just online, because we really like face-to-face interactions. We do community events too. And we create materials or promote our materials for people who want to use them in real life places. So, and these are the materials that I have for you, and I guess I should have handed them out, but I'll start that now. Go that way and go that way. These are posters in a school district in Kentucky, where parents, the place where parents come into the office, in the waiting room, and the same handouts, or very similar handouts, are in children's museums in California, being used to create events for Girl Scouts of America, and in newspapers in Australia. Sometimes I don't know where they are, but then somebody sends me an email just like, hey, I learned about you because we got this handout at this event. So that's the same thing that I have for you guys, of really just emphasizes the S.P.O.I.L system and the SWOT pages that we have for you. We started this as an infographic to support campaign for commercial-free childhood. So it was an infographic for screen-free week. Why going screen-free for a week might work, and some reasons why you might want to do it, and some ideas of some things that you could do instead. But then some people asked that we could make it evergreen to put in school districts, places like that. And so that's what we've done, so we can use the screen-free binder so it can be used any time of the year. What I'm doing next, I'm in the early stages of starting a research study. Pretty much really, the community on Facebook is very interesting to me. I want to look at the relationship between online social support and parental monitoring. So if parents have online social support, are they more likely to do that monitoring stuff? And look at the relationship in between online social support, parental monitoring, and time spent in alternative activities, or time spent in those S.P.O.I.L activities. So if that's something you're interested in, let me know, we can talk about that. And I continue to write, I write for the website, and I'm also writing up using a goal framework in the way that we talk about screen time in terms of positive, negative goals, constituent goals, individual and shared goals. So that's what I'm doing, and then just more of what the people on Facebook tell me to do. And I don't mean Mark Zuckerberg, I mean like the parents, right? Okay? Those are all the references if you are interested in them. And that's all I've got for you. So if you've got questions or comments, I'd like that I would have been teaching at this time do not end class like that. Okay.
So I'm really curious about the impact on the parents, because, you know, this is great for kids' screen time, and that's where I'm focused. But what about the parents' screen time? Are the parents who are coming to you already saying, no, I'm backing off, I'm decreasing? Or is this impacting them, or are you getting kickback from them about their own time?
All of them. So
good.
they don't know, right? And that's the whole purpose of the website and the community is they don't really know. They're trying to navigate it. I say that there's some research that we know, like from early literacy initiatives, that texting parents about early literacy stuff works. And so I say that screen time for parents is like wine. Like we can drink wine, but we don't give it to our 3-year-old. So if parents are using it constructively and they feel like they have a good management of their screen time, then and they feel like they're using it for good use. But that's also why I try to create alternative ways for parents to engage, whether it's community events or face-to-face meetups that we have, or it's the forum on our website, which is not like Facebook in terms of parents can pop in and ask a question and get an answer and other parents can see that. But that's definitely something that parents bring up all the time is we have a lot of parents that don't want their kids, we talk about not having their kids see them on the device all the time and work that they can do, like workarounds they can have for their own work that is physical. Like for me, my college students hate me because I have to hand in real things. Like why can't we use Blackboard or Canvas to submit to you like everybody else? Because I don't want to sit in front of the computer all weekend long grading, right? When I'm grading on the paper, my kids can see what I'm doing, right? And I can supervise and talk to them at the same time and look back and forth on the paper. The computer is not designed for me to be able to do that, right? So that's some of the support that parents seem to be giving each other is finding ways that they can do similar work in other fashions.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
So, my name is Michael Raub. I'm with Common Sense Media.
Oh, hi.
We did a survey. We did a survey in 2017 about the media habits of kids 0 to 8. And what we found was that kids, on average, are spending about 2.5 hours a day with media.
Yeah.
It gets more as kids are getting older. But there's a big difference between what kids from middle and high income homes are spending with media and what kids in lower income homes are spending. So kids from lower income homes are spending about 1 hour and 40 minutes more per day on average than other kids. So one of my questions was looking at something like this and having talked to parents who are, for example, we just had case studies where like I'm talking to moms living in shelters with 3 or 4 kids. Mom's got a lot of stresses, and the kids are, it's a relief for everybody. Like the kid gets some time to themselves in the personal space to spend, listening to music or watching something. Mom gets a little space, whatever. How do we help empower those parents to not just limit screen time, but also to maximize a resource that they do have access to,
Right.
And I guess where does this fit into?
I mean,
that?
that's part of the reason why we started where we did by starting as a website. I'd later like to do an intervention study, like those fruit and vegetable studies, and see, like, if we don't talk to them about screen time at all, and you just talk to them about SPOIL type stuff, does it decrease the screen time naturally? But intervention studies are expensive, hard to do, meet a limited amount of people, tend to be in big cities where there's money and universities, right? And so my hope is that this is something that everybody has equal access to. That's one of the benefits of the internet. I think there's some education there for parents, like Jenny talked about, in terms of feeling like the screens are really helping them get ahead. I think there's a cultural problem that I'm going to blame culture and maybe some of my parenting problems, but a cultural problem where we don't really expect kids to act like kids anymore. And homeless shelters are one of those places that have a lot of rules sometimes about noise and about active play, things that kids do naturally. But we've gotten so accustomed to the fact that kids are going to be silent and sitting still in environments in which they shouldn't really be silent and sitting still. And so I don't think I have an answer for that, other than I'd like to change the culture around expecting children to be making noise, like my kids are in the hotel right now, probably, right? And yeah, I don't know.
I guess part of my question also was, this treats screen time as kind of one big monolithic thing. But
Yeah.
in lots of the research, different media affects different kids in different ways, depending
Yeah.
on what they're using. So is part of this also about feeding into the SPOIL system, like, if you do have media time, if that's your choice as a parent, like, how do you make it social? Like, how do you make it more open-ended and not, like, boxed in by app designers, whatever?
Right, right. And
Because it
that's,
seems like there's maybe, it's not like necessarily always an either or,
Yeah.
especially for some families who really just don't have it.
absolutely. And that's probably one of the problems with us, is that we're like on this extreme side, right? We call ourselves screen-free parenting. We feel like there's so many other people on the other extreme side that we just wanted to like hold the end of this continuum to make sure that it didn't keep sliding. But yeah, and we also talk about, we have articles about 4 ways to evaluate your kids' favorite shows, and so ways that, again, if you have time for those big rocks, it's just going to be sand if it's positive content, right? If it's things that's used together, if it's educational content. Some research that shows that when parents are really nasty and stressed out, educational content might be better for them than interacting with that parent. So kind of supports what some of those families might be talking about. So we've tried to make it really obvious in all the communities that we have, as well as on the website, that we're not hoping to shame parents into being screen-free, but we're really hoping to give parents some other ideas of things that they can do.
So, I love this conference. This is the cross-pollination and intersectionality. So, and that was part of the reason I'm here, is because I communicated at the conference about a pilot program I'm developing, and
Yeah.
they said, oh, you need to be in Megan's section.
Yeah.
So the pilot program, there's lots of similarities. Mine in particular is for Head Start parents of preschoolers. So some little kind of, it's so fun to see the way that we merge and diverge. Because it was to use more in a wraparound service model, so parents that are, there's a parent engagement expectation, right, in a lot of these settings. So how do we work those openings for meeting people where they are, and in my limited experience getting this out there, these parents are everything that we've heard so far, right? Overwhelmed, concerned, recognizing the difference between their own history, their own childhood, and the experiences that their children are having, right? Just on an intuitive level, and they're very, they come to these conversations incredibly mindful and thoughtful. So kind of a tweak, it's funny, I kind of used a food metaphor.
Yeah.
Not kind of, I absolutely used a food metaphor, because I was looking to build on an existing framework that people can identify with.
Right.
And so kind of a lot of the same research, kind of informing the model, but more of like comparing it to a food pyramid, and then using other food metaphors along the way. So the kind of food pyramid around time and things like that, but then also junk food versus healthy food to try to use a metaphor for how the nature of the content itself and stuff like that. So just trying to build on some existing frameworks and getting some, I think, interesting, valuable response to that. But yeah, I think there's a spectrum, and we have to be hitting at all the different access points on the spectrum. And one of the things I always give as a takeaway is the Common Sense Media website and email list, because it's a very tangible, actionable piece, and I look forward to adding
I
this.
did not tell her to say that.
He didn't, I don't even know him, I don't know him.
I'll say it too, that's something that the parents talk about back and forth a lot in terms of evaluating, and a great resource for evaluating content.
But I just wanted to throw in that I do appreciate having you doing something on the other end, and I love Common Sense Media, we use it at our house all the time. But even at their conference, a couple months ago, I watched some of the speakers online, and one of the guys that started that Center for Humane Technology, he said, they were talking about the Goldilocks effect, that a little bit can be good, too much is not so good. And he said, but we've gone so far past that, it's nice to have someone like you.
Yeah, we thought about all sorts of names, like screen light parenting, mama hates screens, those sorts of things, but yeah, we thought, like I said, the majority of people who we work with aren't screen-free, but they feel like they're screen-free because their kids have under an hour a day. They feel like that's screen-free in comparison to what they're finding the people surrounding them.
Hi, I'm Angelica. I'm on the board of CCFC. Thank you so much for coming. This is awesome so far. So wonderful to see so many people here, and such a cross-section of already so early into the day, an experience of an exchange of ideas, and this was awesome. And I immediately had a similar reaction. I work in New York City with home-based caregivers, which unlicensed, informal home-based caregivers, which number into the many, many thousands. Friend, family, neighbors, some of them paid, most of them not. And always these kinds of things are like, so how does this conversation look with that population? Lots of two-gen, stuff that we're dealing with, what screens were like when I was young, did we have them at all, how were we using them? On the train right up, I was reading in Vanity Fair an interview with Lena Waithe, who is awesome and wonderful and amazing. She's, arrived, right, and is having her moment, and one of the things that she sort of credits is how much time she spent in front of TV when it started to look like her and reflect and represent her, a la Cosby Show, a la other things, and that it kept her off the streets of the south side of Chicago before her family moved to a better situation, and that her mother, who was a single parent, said, watch as much as you want, consume as much as you want, don't repeat what you see, don't do what you see, don't repeat what you hear, and don't do what you see, but consume away, right? Because she was working and to keep her, off the street. And so, and the digital divide, and how much talk there's been over the years around the digital divide, and how come we can't get more people sort of like to the other side, right? We don't have emails to communicate with everyone, that's a problem, right? Everyone has to have, a device and a way to stay in touch, but we want that to be balanced, right? And we want the sort of consumption, and we want it to be ad-free where children are involved. And so there are a lot of these issues that get really sticky and complicated for folks. You talk about backyards. Not in Brooklyn, not in central Brooklyn, So, and back in the day, and I'm a child of the 70s, we were assigned to run up and down the stairs in our building, right? And play with the sit and spin. And we made up all kinds of, we had record players, and there was, all kinds of stuff that was different. But childhood was, children were not different, and so, and the onslaught of, stuff came later. But I think that's a critical piece that to me is frequently missing
And we seem to have a new digital divide, right? Like that parents who are in the know and are capable are using screens a lot less, or picking schools, or picking practitioners that support them in that. And that the families that don't have the finances or the education or the capability are the ones who are being stuck with it and have far greater amounts of it. And so I'm more concerned about that than the old digital divide when we have 99% families that are connected in some way. Richard?
I think to answer your questions, I think it's going to take a cultural shift, sorry to blame culture, but I think it's going to take realizing that less screens is a positive good, because right now, Facebook and all these companies are saying, oh, what we're going to do is solve your problems by, to these lower income schools, we're going to solve it by putting more devices. I think we need a cultural shift to understand that actually isn't the secret. Where is the money for green spaces and safe parks and safe places for people to play?
Right, and in inner cities, can we have supervisory programs, right, where somebody's at the park from 3 to 5 every day, or 3 to 6 every day, and that rotates, and that's a nonprofit volunteer organization. Like, are there other ways that we can set up the culture to expect kids to be outside? Because right now we don't expect them, and that's why we don't see them, right?
And also, I'm just going to throw in the foundational impact of media literacy skills and a framework. And I think that can happen in no matter where your setting is, no matter how much media is being consumed. And that, I think there's some really interesting stuff emerging in that variable.
So, Dr. Owens, I would just congratulate you on the collection of a lot of disparate data into a format that parents could digest and we can use to talk to parents. I'm a Waldorf educator.
Oh, I love all
Patrice Maynard. And I now work with the Research Institute for Waldorf Education, and I publish books.
Yeah.
The whole digital discussion we have and the problem of e-books and so forth. But this cultural shift that we're getting at is the bigger problem, so that you could ask the question, why are people at homeless shelters, and then get to the digital problem. But this cultural shift that needs to happen is to look squarely at our culture that says, in the big picture, if it makes money, it's okay. It's a moral question, I think.
Right.
Another
And some people
distraction.
ask us sometimes if we make money. I promise you, we make absolutely no money. We spend a lot of money having to email that many people, which is a good problem. We don't make any money.
But as a Waldorf educator, I would point to the fact that nothing that's genuinely cultural does make money.
Right.
It's a rejuvenating spring of ideas and refreshment and soul nourishment. That's what culture means. And it doesn't, the Met is looking at every 3 years now possibly closing. Because even selling tickets, it cannot make, or tuition in Waldorf schools, it cannot live on just treating it like a commodity. It's bigger than that. And so maybe you could collect data and go talk to Apple and Microsoft and make a moral case for how we're destroying our children, quite literally, given that this is a March day, where this predatory attitude is acceptable. In a class that I taught, there was a parent who was a toy maker who was put out of business, in a big wave of putting little toy makers out of business. He went to a conference where whining was promoted by the CEO of Hasbro Toys as a means to, they had established that 13% of all sales happen because children whine. And so their ad campaign was focused on how to get children to whine. And the woman got a standing ovation, Like, what's wrong with us?
Right.
And other countries, the journalist who wrote the article talked about, couldn't find another country who condoned that. It's only us. So if there's a way to get at that, it would be really,
I agree.
because you've done such a wonderful job really here. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. And you're giving me the college student goodbye by packing up your stuff, so we'll wrap up. But I would love to talk to any of you later on, and I'll be around for the next 2 days. So thank you very much.